whatever happens starting January 20th, I'm very curious to see what this mass deportation is going to look like and how they approach it. Like I said, I support deporting illegal immigrants who have criminal backgrounds. Illegal immigrants who have criminal backgrounds. Let's say it again. Illegal immigrants who have criminal backgrounds. I don't like the idea of just kicking down a frickin', I said it before, a Panda Express and saying, who's working back here? Show me your papers. I don't agree with that, right? That feels like, God, this dude, these are, they call them domicile migrants, right? Domicile immigrants that are working, they're doing, they're living a life, but I do not like the sound of that, and people are gonna hate hearing that, but I don't like the sound of that.
The opinions of the guests and host are their own and do not represent the opinions of IRONCLAD, the Border Patrol, or the Department of Homeland Security.
We cut through the partisan talking points. We're not interested in perpetuating fear. We're interested in seeking truth, hearing what's really going on America's borderland. Welcome to Borderland, an IRONCLAD original. This episode, I'm doing it with my producer, Bruna, who has been deep into her own research of the subject, from borders to cartels, the drugs, the immigration. And we were taking some of the questions we've had on social media platforms, and we want to have a conversation about those. And I want to give Bruna the opportunity to ask away, fire away. And just so we know, I have not seen these questions. It's going to be more of a discussion, but we're just going right into it, and we're going to talk about a lot of the stuff that you guys are asking us to give answers to or give my personal opinion on. So here we go.
Yeah, well, it's good to be back. Talking to you again. I mean, we talk on a regular basis, but the second time that we're doing this kind of episode, I in particular brought this up because it's becoming a hot button issue. We can't deny that we're kind of facing a turning point right now. In the next couple weeks, we have a new administration coming in, and the topics of immigration and drugs, I think, are going to be at the forefront of what the next administration is going to be trying to change, evolve, problem solve, however you want to look at it. And I wanted to get your thoughts, and our viewers have thoughts. We put out a call a few weeks ago, actually, that we wanted to discuss sort of the nuances on the war on drugs. Obviously, the war on drugs isn't anything new. It's been around officially since the 70s, with Nixon declaring a war on drugs. So this isn't anything new, but we are facing a turning point that no matter where immigration goes, where policy goes, the cartels are going to be affected. No matter what, in some way, somehow, whatever the Trump administration does, byproduct, cartels, the drug trade, all of that is going to be affected. And so, yeah, we have some thoughts from our viewers, and me, I've done a lot of research, and of course, I don't see us solving any problems here, but this is something we need to talk about, because big things could be happening. We're talking militarization. We're talking, is legalization of drugs the answer? How do we win this war? Is this war even, are we able to win it? Or, by winning it, it really means, can we stop it? And since the 70s, personally, I don't think we've come even close. So,
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's start with that. Let's start with the history of that. And, as long as we've had DEA, right? As long as we've had border security, those are probably the two top organizations who are trying to combat the drug trade, right? Yeah. We have only had more drug trade happening.
Correct.
Right? And so
Correct.
Two things I think are happening. As much as we are figuring out or solving a problem, the cartel is also solving the counter problem to that.
100%.
And so, which has been very fascinating. It's been very fascinating, from the old school days of, flying in cocaine, hiring people to fly it in, to now that's, as much as we're not paying attention to that side of it, I am sure there's still somewhere people flying in narcotics from different countries
Absolutely.
into undisclosed locations here in America that we're just not paying attention to. Like too many gaps.
Yeah.
And I would say that every time we come up with the answer, you know, it is only smart for good business people to counter that answer with another option. And so, as long as we're fighting humans, these humans can think of any plan that we come up with and think of another idea because it is financially so lucrative. They have the money to create new outcomes, right? I.e., tunnels, even deeper than we probably are even looking.
Yep.
Corruption, deeply rooted in our own American system. Many ways of transporting drugs, but also creating these drugs for pennies. So, which means they're able to make tons of drugs, which means they can have bigger losses and not affect them financially.
Yep.
So, you know, I think the truth of the matter is we have seen this situation just get worse and worse and worse. And no matter what us as America has thrown at it so far, it hasn't really changed much.
Yeah.
So I think that's the situation we have now.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. You know, I guess moving forward to me is like, is there a way we can stop it? I want to hear what you think.
Well, even your question is actually one of the questions from our viewers. He straight up said, you know, I think the question about all of this is it's not about winning it. The question isn't whether it's winnable. I think and feel the question is, can we stop it? And honestly, I'm very much into research and into giving context. And so hopefully I won't give the full history. I'll keep it very high level, but just hopefully to you guys, the viewers and the listeners, will appreciate that too, of just how long we've been fighting this and the different tactics that we've used. And so, you know, the war on drugs really became a thing in the 70s with Nixon. You know, he declared it public enemy number one. And, you know, Reagan only amplified that more. And the same thing with the Clinton era. And let's not even forget, too, that there's a war on drugs on the American side, but there is also the war on drugs on the Mexican side. So in America, 70s, 80s, 90s, you know, we really criminalized it. That was the intent. You know, it's public enemy number one. Sentencing and incarceration grew more. And obviously that didn't improve conditions in any way. The more drugs became criminalized, the more the black market became profitable because demand for drugs has never really gone down. You know, starting in the 70s, recreational drugs, what was going on in Vietnam, all of that fueled this demand that really hasn't gone down. And the more criminalized it became, I mean, that's what really gave the more rise and power to the cartels. You know, back then it was more the Colombian cartels, you know, smuggling heroin and cocaine and everything in between at the time. Criminalization of it didn't do much, and increasing sentencing and incarceration, that didn't do much. Obviously, as we're getting into the 2000s, at least in America, 9/11 happened. The global war on terror definitely took a front seat to anti-drug policies. You know, that wasn't, America at least didn't focus on it as much, but President Bush at the time actually, I believe it was in 2008, there was an initiative between the U.S. and Mexico that was called the Merida Initiative, and our guests have talked about this. Where I've read multiple sources. Some say 1 billion, other sources say 3 billion, but billion tracks that the U.S. basically gave Mexico funding in the billions. You know, we're talking training and surveillance and equipment, all under this initiative to help the drug trafficking and flow from Mexico to the United States. So, you know, American tax dollars have been paying in the billions America has tried to help Mexico in terms of military and funding and equipment to curb this war, essentially. So this was back in 2008, if I'm not mistaken, the Merida initiative. So in the meantime, when we're talking in the 2000s, in 2006, Felipe Calderon becomes president in Mexico. And his whole stance was militarize everything. He went after the cartels on his side, full blown, you know, we're here to massacre you guys using military force. As we all know, since this is more recent history, trying to take out kingpins in Mexico, he was able to do that, but that only encouraged the cartels to create smaller fractions of each other. So hundreds upon thousands of innocent people were killed in Mexico because now there was like a civil war essentially happening. The military going against the cartels, cartels fighting against each other for more territory control, and cartels, bigger cartels splitting into smaller cartels like the factions that we have today. So essentially that approach and the Merida initiative, did it solve anything? Big picture, not really. And then we move from Calderon to AMLO, who we've already talked about, our guests have already talked about, you know, the whole hugs, not bullets thing. Once again, you know, his approach was less military and let's work on more resources and more like social stabilization, you know, trying to find more humanitarian ways of getting the Mexicans to not want to get involved with the drug trade. And his was more of a humanitarian approach to it. And that solved nothing, essentially. And then obviously, then you have that with the Biden administration, our recent open borders, the coming of fentanyl and it being extremely cheaper to make, the American demand for fentanyl only increasing, and now we're not dealing with drugs that you have to grow somewhere. You can just make them in a lab and they're very cheap. And couple that with open borders, you know, now we're in the current state that we're in, which is, you know, many different administrations, I think they have tried the militarized approach. Some administrations have tried a more humanitarian approach because it's like, well, we got to curb the demand so that we stop supply. But that also has been ineffective so far. And now we have the Trump administration coming in and we're hearing, you know, threats of going the militarized approach and pressuring Mexico. And, you know, so that's like a very high level overview of just how this is not new at all. And can we stop it? That's tough to answer because what other tactic can we try successfully? This is now such a complex issue, even more complex than it was 30 years ago, because of even the drugs themselves evolving. You know, it's not just heroin and cocaine. The fact that the drug trade is so cheap now with fentanyl, and it's synthetic, and you know, and the cartels are now into extortion and they're dipping into other businesses. It's not that they need drugs to thrive. I think if we stop the drug flow, they're organized crime groups. Let's emphasize the word organized. They know what they're doing. If one of their businesses fails, they're gonna move on to something else. That's my personal take on it.
Yeah, I think we'd have to address this in layers. Obviously, the approach that we've taken, whether it's been harsh or nice, they haven't worked. But I would say look at it in an aspect of what's at least slowed down the traffic. I would say a harsher approach towards cartels at least has slowed down the matter, right? It's slowed down the progress. But there's still, it doesn't change. They change, we change, they change, we change, and it continues. when you think about like, are we going to be able to stop drugs? I think the question is more, what do you consider to be good enough? You know, because there's never going to be 100% drug stoppage, right? There's never going to be 100% stop. And so what can we do to at least create a slowing of the flow, pinching the traffic, if you will? And we have to start with tightening up the border. Because if you don't do that, well, then you have easy access for transport, and then you have just it's an open flow of traffic. So we have to stop this open kind of border style that's been going on for the past administration, which that's what the Trump administration talks about.
Yeah.
I imagine they're going to put in some things like they had in the past, things like punishment for anyone coming over illegal will have some kind of punishment to the point of, you know, jail time. And that would hopefully create a deterrence. Then it would mean we'd be backtracking to the way it was when he was in office originally, and which means, you know, more stringent border means it's harder to pass dope, which means obviously the cost of it goes up a little bit, so that's a benefit to the cartel. But on the other side of it, less would be here in America. And I say less, I think it's just a fraction less, not a significant amount. But that would be the first thing they're going to do, and that's the first thing that I think needs to happen either way. That hits two parts. You're slowing down the traffic of illegal immigration, and then you're slowing down the traffic of drugs just by way of closing the border down a little bit better. The other side is like, we live in a culture where, you know, drugs are so prevalent, but not even that. The drug addiction is so prevalent, like the addiction to these, which is really the root cause of the demand. And so we have to address that in America right away. And we've seen different ways of addressing it. There's some cities that give clean needles to addicts. You can, however you feel about that is on you, but it's interesting to hear. When you hear that, you're like, what? Why are they doing that? Well, because they're avoiding communicable diseases, right? Communicable diseases that are by shared needles, AIDS, hepatitis, things like that. And they're hoping that, you know, at least if they're going to do the drugs, they're going to do it in a cleaner manner, which part of me understands that. The other part is like, are you enabling it? Like, if you know addicts, you're not enabling an addict. They're going to find a way to get their drugs.
Yeah,
and they're going to find a way to get high. And so in that mindset, some cities are at that level of support of I guess, I wouldn't even call it support, but they're on that level of, that's the position they take when you're dealing with addiction in those cities. Los Angeles, Frisco, Washington, right? These very common, kind of more leaning towards the liberal side would kind of be the ones who offer that. I don't 100% disagree with it, right? I lived in Utah for a long time, and they have Suboxone clinics and methadone clinics, right? And those are just another synthetic drug that helps people get off of opiates.
Yeah.
And again, that's an interesting one, but at least there's progress in getting people to get off of the harsher drug and leaning more into it. So some cities are already leaning towards finding the answer for addiction. That's one of the biggest problems, because we are the big demand. But what you said earlier is so true, is that, well, yeah, but they've kind of, you know, they've diversified where they don't necessarily need drugs, right? Right now they're making more money off of human trafficking.
Correct.
Right now they're making good money off of other commodities that they sell, mangoes, and you know what I mean, and different lands, right? Different kind of agricultural situations. And so that's crazy. But for me, that's not drugs. Okay, that's a different layer we'll attack when we need to, right? Like, we can attack that another time. Right now we need to figure out the drugs. I think the big question, like, are we ever going to win this battle? I think people need to determine what they see as winning, and I think we're not all going to be on the same page of what winning means, right? I think that's something that we're all going to have to establish. Like, my view on what winning is and what your view on winning is never going to be the same. I would love to see, I guess from my position of how much I've done this work and I've lived it, you're never going to have a zero, right? If 100 is max and 0 is none, we're never going to have it at 0.
Right.
And so I would be comfortable with somewhere in the 25% range is stopped, right? Like, or only allow 25% range, because at least that's a more successful number than just complete open flow of drugs. And so we all have to determine what that looks like of what winning is or what is stopping the cartels. As long as we're slowing it down, that's a direction on the right side. I think we're going to have a slowing down no matter what because of this new administration, what their plans are doing with the border. So that's good. I am more interested and curious to see if there is a more strategic and robust plan for dismantling drug trafficking organizations. And they're not only Mexico. Like we say Mexico so often because the cartel is, I guess, in the proximity to us, is the most immediate threat.
Yeah.
But there's transnational organizations all across the world that are assisting in this same efforts who are a part of the problem, China and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so, like, there's layers to that as well and how we choose to approach that. And so I believe our goal should be on slowing down what we have now at least, and then really focusing on our country internally and how do we really start cracking down on addictions within so that we can slow down the demand of the product already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And to say that there aren't cartels in America, I don't know what rock you're living under. Of course,
right.
They're here. You know, I don't think we need to go in as far and really just point the finger at Mexico. I don't think that's the situation anymore, and that's why, like, I've enjoyed, maybe enjoyed's the wrong word, but looking back at history has been very eye-opening because a lot of the tactics in the past have been trying to aim at the head of the snake, which I understand. On paper, that sounds like a good tactic, in my opinion. But history has also shown us just taking out kingpins does not stop the cartel or even slow the flow of drugs at all, you know? So even, I think that's where it's, like you said, it's interesting finding the strategy of dismantling these organizations, because even starting at the top has proven to not be very effective. You know, and military action is only going to create civil wars, you know, against the military, and cartels against each other to fight for territory. And, you know, the Calderon era is where we now have the many factions that we have today. It's because of that war, essentially. It split off larger cartels into smaller ones that are now extremely powerful today, because then it became just a competition for territory because, oh, the military's coming after us now. So that's all that provided.
Ironclad creates premium content no matter the environment. From extreme elements to unforgiving terrain, we thrive on crafting content that captures the essence of your brand in the most challenging conditions. Bring your brand story to life, ensuring your message leaves an impact. Ready to elevate your vision? Connect with us today at ironcladagency.com.
I'll go into this question because it has to do that with a little bit. One of our viewers says, you know, at this point, is it possible that the cartels can be stopped with them intermingled with the legal export of goods from Mexico? I mean, they're...
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I'll say from the interviews we had on this show and from the experts that we've interviewed, a majority of them believe that there's corruption embedded all the way to the highest positions in Mexico. So that being said, this is a bigger problem because not only Cartel, who we view through social media and through what we hear are these bad guys, there's also lawyers, law enforcement officers, judges, political officials who are tied into the corruption of this. And remind you, it's our opinion of what corruption is, not theirs.
Correct.
Some of them are in a position of believing like this is just how we work things. This is how things work here in Mexico. Not as corruption, but as how we get by day in and day out, living, you know, neighbors with these drug trafficking organizations that they have to. Plato y plomo, right? Silver or lead. Either you take the money or you die. And so in that mindset, almost in a distressed mindset, they are living just what normal life would be for them since they've ever been born, and this is just the way it is in Mexico. Yeah. So I do believe that just based on the interviews we've had on our own show with the experts that we've been able to be honored with and blessed with, that the corruption goes very deep in Mexico, and it's that blurry line of we don't know what's even though it's a legit mango company, it also has some kind of ties to corruption as well, right? And so like that's I don't know if there's anything that is legally coming through is also not tied to some kind of corruption somewhere down the line.
Yeah.
And which then how do you undo that braid?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I was thinking of that. It sounds ridiculous, but I was trying to picture myself as Claudia Sheinbaum, and it's like in her position of power as president, knowing all of this, because she's not stupid. I do think she's absolutely aware, but I don't know. Maybe that's where I would start. I would look inside my own government first, and maybe try the dismantling from there. Like the same way we're saying, hey, we got to take care of stuff here in America too. Like, don't just point the finger in Mexico. Yeah. We got cartels here as well. We have addiction, severe addiction here. Let's focus on that. And then maybe on the other side, I was thinking that I'm like, maybe if I were her, I would take that same approach internally. Really take a look at who's serving in your government and maybe try to, the trickling effect that way, or dismantling from the top down, because we can only speculate, but research has led me to believe that, I personally think the corruption goes extremely deep.
I'm curious to know what your opinions are on the conversation everyone talks about more recently, is that American special operations soldiers going into Mexico and trying to dismantle and disrupt the cartel.
That's, again, such a complex question with many layers. I think...
Well, what's different about you and me is that I've lived that lifestyle, and so I have my opinions on this, but I'm curious what yours would be.
Gosh, that's just going to have to be so well planned and thought out, because I don't see the use of military force not having collateral damage. You can't punish all of Mexico for just those bad apples. Granted, there's a lot of them. Like, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of them. And, even in our episodes in the comments, I see a lot of people also saying, like Mexico's a lost cause. It's a lost state, organized crime controls it. That might be true. I don't know. Call it compassion, because I'm also an immigrant, but I don't know. I'm afraid of that happening, because they are our neighbors, and America, as well as their economies, depend on a healthy relationship. And, you can't deny the influence that Mexican culture has in America. America is the beautiful melting pot that it is. And I think it is highly influenced by Spanish and Mexican culture, Latin American culture. It's a big part of America. And, you can't pick where you're born. Some of us do get out. We get to travel. We get to go live somewhere else. But I would argue some of the best people are down there, living in Sinaloa, living in Culiacan, or whichever the city may be, that, the threat of American military, I think it's going to have a lot of collateral damage of innocence. And to me personally, I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but for me, it is a scary thought, because that is almost really going to war with our neighbor. Yeah. And that's not to be taken lightly.
Yeah, I'd say this. I think, and I'm trying to word this where it doesn't sound rude at all, but your lack of experience with special operations and how they do missions, I think leads you to think of like the chaos of war. Yeah. And I would almost try to lean more towards, if there was an event where we were going into Mexico, they would be very strategic and well thought out and well planned. That does not mean there will not be collateral damage, but I don't think it'd be collateral damage to the extent that you think, because we see all this war stories and shows and this and that.
Yeah.
When you're talking high-level special operations, these are very targeted, intel-driven type of missions that would be very accurate. And they would be, I mean, look, I did this. Killer captured high-value targets in Iraq and Afghanistan, right? And we look for the one person. And in those deployments, there was very little collateral damage. But in war, there is collateral damage, right? You know? And so I really believe that the outside world of special operations sees it more that way.
Yeah.
And has more of a fearful thought of it. I don't necessarily have that. I know we would do well, right? But I just also fear that, like, the optics of the way social media is ran and the way all the media is, it would make us look like that's happening. Right? Like the worst of it. And they would, if one person lost their toe, it would be the worst thing ever, and it'd make American military look really bad because of the way the optics look of that. And so I'm more afraid of the psychological fear that is driven through social media and the media that would damage the morale, but not even just the morale, but would damage the reputation of American special operations. That's what I fear.
Yeah,
that's what I fear.
That's fair.
Because that's been used so much in America and so much in during just the past several years that is my thought. You know.
And I agree with you. I'm completely inexperienced in this. You know, I think, it's just going to have to be extremely well thought out, which I absolutely have faith in our military to do that. Yeah. But, you know, it's Mexico and the United States. You know, I've been wanting to, like, even, I don't know, one day even do a deeper dive and even put more content out there. Like, the U.S. and Mexico, I think they've just been in a very, like, toxic relationship. You know, it's like the boyfriend and the girlfriend that want to make it work and they keep trying, but things keep happening and they just can't find a groove. You know, that's kind of how I see it. It's a toxic relationship, but that both countries need to have because we're neighbors, because of, you know, economical purposes, trade routes, whatever you want to call it. So, taking military action on their land, that is, I'm just going to stick with it. It just needs to be very well thought out, very well planned, and, you know, and also both America and Mexico be prepared for the repercussions of relationship between both countries. Then what the heck is that going to look like after, you know? Yeah.
And I'm not saying I sit here and I'm approving of it. I would love to see what that plan looks like. You know what I mean? I'd say it that way. But the other side is sometimes we forget that we are the ones who trained Los Zetas, right? We are the ones who originally trained one of the big and most dangerous cartels that's out there.
And we gave them guns.
Right. Oh, right. Exactly. And so now you're going up against an enemy who is highly trained. Not all of them, but a good amount. During the interview we had with Ed Calderon is one of the questions I asked him. You know, some of the guys from GAFE who continue to do their training, some of those guys are highly trained, who show skills very similar to what high-level special operations tier 1 elements look like when entering, clearing a room, right? So then it becomes like, whoa, how many of these guys are that well trained, right? So then the counter to my thought is like, how dangerous would this be for American soldiers, for our special operations? I know our guys are talented. I know they're very skilled in what they do. We've been doing this for 20-something years. We have a highly trained military, but they have been fighting in this very guerrilla war style for so long. It reminds me of in Afghanistan, where even though these individuals in Afghanistan who are Al-Qaeda or whatnot, who are fighting war in the most minimal outfits, I'm talking sandals and their common dress, the kind of the dress code that they wear, and they're able to fight and actually do very well. They've caused a lot of damage to the American soldier just because it was their land and they've been fighting in this very guerrilla war style for so long. It was a threat no matter what night vision we had, no matter what capabilities we were able to have. We were still taking death on the battlefield because they knew their land better than we did, and they fought for years just trying to survive. And it's very similar to the Mexican people, right? It's very similar to the cartel, who's been fighting this weird internal war that they have within themselves for so long that they're not afraid of war. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so that's a side of this whole thing that I'm like, man, I wrote an article about this for one of my classes. I'll share it to you later, but it talked about, like, did we potentially train the fighting force that we might have to be fighting in the near future?
Yeah.
And that's a thought.
Yeah. Well, the collateral damage goes both ways. I know I said
Right.
it, talking about Mexico, but we're talking about our people too here,
Absolutely.
If we're going to go
Good
fight
call.
this war, there will be collateral damage on our side. And,
Yeah.
that's also very scary and very sad for me to think about on our side. And, I know this isn't the focus of this particular topic, but the same thing could be said about mass deportations. That's going to be a thing. And, like, even in your latest interview, like, with Jorge Ventura,
Yeah, with Jorge.
It's like, if we're going to focus on mass deportations of criminals, how's that going to work? How, if we're just
Yeah.
going to take out all the Venezuelans that came here illegally, that are, whether they're Tren de Aragua or whatever, like, kind of the same thought. Do we
Yeah,
have
this is a tough
criminals
one.
here? Absolutely, that need to be deported. I think so. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But then, then we're talking about people that have been here for 20, 30 years, people that have had kids here, people that are actually even paying taxes. And, are we going to lump them all together for mass deportation? Is mass deportation going to have collateral damage, air quotes, in that sense, So, like,
Yeah.
it all just needs to be very well planned and thought out, and the repercussions that are come after, you better be ready to face those too, and not just only think about that after.
Yeah, I think that's what we're having right now is, you have people protesting in the streets about this, right? And again, it is the psychology behind this that people are using to try and fearmonger it, right? And so there's some people who are so afraid that they believe everyone's getting deported. If you're brown skin, you're getting deported.
Right.
I don't believe that, but that's a thought. That's a legit thought that's happening currently. There's protests all over the nation right now, mainly in, like, California, different areas that are saying, oh, if you're Hispanic and you voted for Trump, like, I hope your people get deported. And I go, this whole thing that's like, it's a psychological warfare that's happening right now. And it's actually tearing people apart because they wholeheartedly believe that this next administration is going to deport everyone who's brown skinned.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily believe that. I think that's a little far-fetched. I think that's a little fear-mongering. I do believe there's going to be set in place, like I said during the Ventura interview, is that I think we'll go back more to the older traditional ways that the Obama era was doing, where ICE was going out and, picking up illegal immigrants that were either working illegally in certain locations, but as well as breaking the law, people who broke the law, DUIs, assaults, whatever that may be. And that gives the segue for deportation. You broke the law. Oh, we just identified you're illegal. We're going to go ahead and set you up for deportation. I really believe that's kind of the style that we're going to have.
Mm-hmm.
If they decide to do some kind of mass deportation, and the one that everyone's visualizing is just like round them up, like that would be a terrible thing for America, in my opinion, because the optics of that is scary.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're just targeting, brown folk, which doesn't make me feel good.
It doesn't make me feel good either.
Right? You know what I mean? So it's like, but like half of America is so fed up that that's what they're like, yeah, round them up. Like, no, we have to really do this in a way that there's a humanitarian factor here. And it's hard to say that, like, as much as we had this massive influx in 4 years, this is going to take 15 years.
Oh, yeah.
This is going to take 20 years
Yeah.
to do it where it's appropriate, and do it where, hey, if you're not here legally, well, then what's the process for you either to become legal because you're doing all the right things, or if you're a criminal who snuck in here just trying to avoid detection, well, once we find you, you're out of here, right? And I think all American, I know for a fact not, because I have one guy on my social media all the time, countering everything we say. But for the majority, we all agree, and just based on, I think voters and everything else that's out there says, we agree that we want a safe country, right? Because the voters have spoken. This border is a major situation in this recent voting. But not even that. But we also want to allow immigrants to come to America and reap the benefits of the land of opportunity. Now, we normally like that to be in the legal capacity, right? Doing it the way that our legal system allows. But those who have came in seeking asylum and have a legitimate cause for asylum will be granted that same opportunity. The problem was, for the past 4 years, everyone got granted that opportunity.
That's right.
And waiting for the immigration judge, and which was so overwhelmed that we couldn't do it in a way that I felt did its due diligence.
Yeah.
And so now we have this system with millions of illegal immigrants into America who are now deemed seeking asylum by way of the notice to appear. How are you going to decipher that?
Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one that I don't know. Like, look, if you're saying, hey, from this point on, if you enter illegally, you're going to be getting deported, and you're also going to be doing time in jail, and we're going to do, if you're doing from that, like, here's the line now, guys. January 20th. Here's the line. Everyone stop. Anyone comes in is getting deported. Okay. Everyone before that in the past 4 years, that's projected to be somewhere close to 15 to 20 million. I'm talking gotaways, NTAs, you name it, right? 20 million people. How are you planning to do that in a way that is appropriate, in a way that is not feel like a targeting, right? In a way that doesn't burn every American watching and saying, this is disgusting, we let this happen? Like, how do you do that? I'm curious.
Yep, me too.
Right? Because I care about people, but I also care about the country. And I don't know if I'm willing to do what El Salvador has done, in the sense of round them all up, put them away, and figure it out later.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the El Salvador model. Like, hey, you're a gang member? Well, you hang around gang members? All of you guys, get out of here. You're going to prison forever. No one's going to talk to you. Right? Like, that's taking humanitarian, like, that's taking away human rights. I'm not personally okay with that. So, whatever happens starting January 20th, I'm very curious to see what this mass deportation is going to look like and how they approach it. Like I said, I support deporting illegal immigrants who have criminal backgrounds. Illegal immigrants who have criminal backgrounds. Let's say it again. Illegal immigrants who have criminal backgrounds.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea of just kicking down a freaking, I said it before, a Panda Express and saying, who's working back here? Show me your papers. Like, I don't agree with that, right? That feels like, God, this dude, these are, they call them domicile migrants, right? Domicile immigrants that are working, they're doing, they're living a life. They've implemented their world into the system, whether they came here illegally or legally, becomes it's an issue. But like, I do not like the sound of that, and people are going to hate hearing that. But I don't like the sound of that.
No, I don't either.
It doesn't feel right.
I don't either.
You know what I mean?
I'm with you. It's, how are you going to divide the bad apples from the good ones? That it comes down to that. And that's very, and like, I think Jorge was the one that even brought up, it's like, and where are they going to go? Some of them, their own countries don't take them back either, like Venezuela.
Yeah.
So like,
well, did you see,
what are we going to do?
Did you see today that Sheinbaum said that she's going to start accepting some immigrants from America?
I did.
Well, that's crazy.
That's huge.
Just last week, she said she wasn't.
Right.
Like, and so like that big shift, there had to be some kind of conversation that's like, look, we help you, you help me.
Yeah.
Right. And her making that decision alone is like, oh, Trump's whatever Trump's administration is trying to do there sounds like it's already working. It's influencing in the right way. 'Cause she didn't sound aggressive. She's been coming off very aggressive towards Trump, kind of standing her ground, like, you're not going to come here and tell me what to do.
Right.
But this recent interview, it was like, yeah, we're going to support that. And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
So that's a first step in like, oh, if you're going to support that, well, then that means we are doing mass deportations.
Correct.
And all those countries that are not willing to take in, right, they don't want to repatriate their countrymen. No. straight to Mexico, which we had someone on the show that talked about the overflow of the Mexican housing facilities or jails for immigrants. So then it becomes like, oh my God, this is going to get crazy.
It's going to get wild. If that's how they do it, because we've had Tom Holman on. We know, like, if this is really starting from day one, like he and Trump are claiming it's day one. You know, we're a couple weeks out from the first wave of deportations, and we'll see. I don't know what that's going to look like.
Hey, Mike Baker here, host of the President's Daily Brief podcast, former CIA operations guy, and a big fan of Ironclad podcasts and productions. The folks at Ironclad have graciously given me a moment to tell you about an epic trek taking place in January, this month, and well into February, in order to raise awareness and funds for the UK Special Forces Benevolent Fund. Now, the Benevolent Fund is focused on the needs and well-being of the United Kingdom's military and veterans. It's a great cause with a lot of work to do. To raise awareness for the fund, 5 of us from the UK's Special Forces Club, along with 10 camels and an amazing support team, set off in early January to retrace the 700-mile grueling route taken by Lawrence of Arabia and a small Arab army back in 1917 to go from Al-Waj in the Saudi Kingdom to Aqaba in Jordan. Assuming nothing goes sideways, we expect to ride into Aqaba on 7 February. If you'd like to learn more, please check out the fund's website at www.sfcbf.org. Also, you can get updates on the trek by following the trek's Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn sites. Just search SFCBF Trek. And thank you again to Ironclad for their support.
We have one viewer that wrote in all caps, legalizing is the answer. So just kind of the last point to touch on. How do we feel about legalization as a tactic?
Before I started this journalism kind of journey, never in a million years have I thought that would be the answer. Never. Yeah. I would be like, hell no, that's crazy. People blah, 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 blah. All the ideas of no, what people are gonna, because in my head was everyone's gonna go out and get drugs and it's gonna destroy the country.
Right.
And then I'm like, wait a minute, I wouldn't. I ain't trying to. I don't need to use drugs. I don't want to. I have no want. So then it's like, well, then why would I care? You know what I mean? And it goes into this like, I don't know. And then you start interviewing. I think we've interviewed 3 experts. Yeah. 3 experts who have said the same exact thing, which made it like, okay. I mean, I went to sleep thinking about. I went to sleep just like, why wouldn't we? What do we get? And the only thing I got like, it is an interesting thought. I'm not going to say I support it 100%. I'm saying the idea really answers and checks all those blocks of like, oh yeah, you take the funding directly away from the drug smuggling organizations. You take away their money immediately. So then what? Well, then they're going to have to rely on selling avocados and fruit. Right. It's like, that's not so bad, right? Like, that's not so. And then Mexico can deal with that directly. Mexico can do whatever they need to. Their FBI, their DEAs, whoever can manage whatever the cartel's doing now to make money, whether it be the corruption in hotels, whether it be whatever. But it ain't drugs. It ain't drugs. So then, okay, well, then Mexico managed that. We don't have to worry about it because ours are legal. Right? But then it goes, okay, well, now we have to manage ourselves internally. And then it's like, well, we already are. You know what I mean? If you're someone who struggles with that, well, we just got to put things in place that, just like our Suboxone clinics, just like our methadone clinics, just like some of the needles that they're giving away in the streets of California, people who have addictions are going to be addicts, whether you like it or not. Whether you try and stop it or not, they will find a way. Mm-hmm. That's what addiction is. Yeah. And so then we'll have to create a whole infrastructure that supports this in a sense of how are we going to tax it, how are we going to protect it, and then how are we going to keep our kids away from it, right? Because that's the concern. You don't want to create more addicts, right? You don't want to create a culture that just becomes, that is consuming all of these products by way of, I guess, entertainment. But people do it anyways. I grew up in L.A. There was cocaine, there was ecstasy, there was marijuana. It's all available to anyone who chooses. I didn't touch it because I knew I wanted to be in law enforcement. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? I might have touched a couple things, but that's not here nor there. Point is, you know, I think it comes down to America has to now start focusing on their families and how they raise their kids and how they protect them from the realities of the world. It's no different than stopping them from smoking marijuana or doing cocaine or pills. It's no different. You can find painkillers in your mom's cabinet right now. You know what I mean? Whether you choose to take it or not is up to you and how you're raised and kind of some of these moral dilemmas that we all face. And so the conversation of legalizing drugs became very fascinating to me. I'm like, oh my God, it kind of solves the problem. Like I said, it checks the blocks for me, which makes it like, I don't want to publicly say I support it because it doesn't feel right saying that. But truthfully, it checks a lot of blocks for me. And I'm like, I would love to read more on this. I would love to understand what the economic kind of, I guess, pros and cons would be.
Yeah.
And I would love to see any kind of the psychology behind this, and once they've legalized marijuana, what that did.
Yeah.
Now I'm more fascinated in learning more about what changes happened for marijuana in America, which would kind of be a really good case study for whether if you legalized all.
Yeah. Yeah, right now we've got marijuana and alcohol as the case
Alcohol
studies.
kills more.
So
Alcohol kills more people than anything.
Yeah.
And it has become it is the craziest thing that the American culture, not only American culture, many, but we live in America, and I'll tell you this, it is a drinking culture. Your friend groups, your social circles, the military, my whole world revolved around drinking, so much so that it has also, just because of my own studies, it is one of the number one reasons why veterans commit suicide, drinking. So it's this really, and no one's fighting that, right? There isn't this big fight for like, ban alcohol, right? It doesn't exist. Right. And so it comes down to that we have, as a social kind of construct, have decided that alcohol is okay, marijuana is bad, or is kind of okay now, right? Because we've legalized it, and then everything else is bad. The crazy part of, and I don't condone this, I'm just saying, alcohol will legitimately kill you. It is a poison. Opiates cause respiratory distress or heart attack. If you stop an opiate right away, like if you stop taking it and you go through your little withdrawals, it will not kill you like alcohol will if you just stop cold turkey, right? And so it's like, how did we determine that alcohol is safer than opiates? And there's probably more there. I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert in any of this. So like, if there's some drug expert out there, please enlighten me on this subject. I love to learn. And that's why this is fascinating for me, because I'm like, I need to learn more, because why did we come as a country, as a nation, not even that, as a world, been so okay with alcohol in everyone's culture? Soju, freaking tequila, I mean, sake. Every culture has their alcohol and completely supports it, but it is one of the biggest downfalls for people. And then on the other side of it, it's like you demonize everything else. It just confuses me. It confuses me that we chose one and not the other. Yeah. And so this whole subject it's fun to, and maybe I shouldn't use that word fun. It is exciting to see why people believe legalizing would be the right answer. And it is, to me, it's like so fascinating because it's so opposite of how I was raised. It's so opposite of how I ever believed. And the more we dig into the subject, Bruno, I think you're the same. It's like, we're like, is this the only answer? I don't know. I mean, I will say, given the research I've done in the history, it's the only tactic so far that has not been fully tried. We've gone at it from the military perspective. We've gone at it from, trying more, I don't know, humanitarian, social reform. To a degree, that has also been tried. I don't know. All I'll say is that I'd have to probably dig deeper into, like you said, maybe taking marijuana as the case study, because we got black market marijuana. I mean, the Chinese are having a party over here with black market marijuana. So let's also not ignore that. Yeah,
So-
they're still smuggling marijuana.
Of course.
There's still a market. But has any country done it yet? Has any country attempted that yet? Legalizing it?
I would have to look into it. I don't want to give false information here. So
I don't know. That's something to look into.
I would have to dive deeper into that. And
Either way, I don't know if our bosses are going to allow us to even share this episode. I'm kidding. I just think it's interesting. And like I said, I never thought that way in my entire life until I started interviewing several people who mentioned it. And when they had their reasons, it raised the question.
yeah. Yeah. And one particular person that his interview hasn't aired yet, but, he was a prominent figure within the cartels themselves. And, he even said legalizing is the only way of beating this somewhat.
You're right.
So
You're right.
that's what caught my attention, when it was really someone from the actual inside that lived the life, who was a distributor himself of drugs, and knew the cartels from firsthand experience. So that's what caught my attention to that. And then, just saw that in our comments section, given the episodes we've aired in the last few weeks. So it's starting to take off, and I'm like, well, maybe we should just chat, because in a couple weeks, things are gonna happen with the new administration, and I just want the show to be somewhere that our listeners can come to and that they'll hear honest conversation, but we have the same mission statement. We want people to get to the truth as much as possible, or at least have educated conversations about these important topics. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And those who are listening in the near future, we're going to dig so much deeper into this drug and cartel world, because we got to get down to the answers of that. And I'm so curious about more. I want to see more about what their tactics are. Technically, I also want to know more about these drugs. I want to dig into it more. And so I think the audience, you guys are going to really love the direction that we're going to continue to push for the show. And we appreciate all the support, and we appreciate all the continued support. So thank you.